One of the most common things that I work with is not feeling good enough. And what that can be translated to in a more mainstream way is a lack of self-esteem or low self-esteem. And in this video, what I'm going to be talking about is the one thing that I would be doing to overcome that if I suddenly woke up tomorrow and I had this problem. What I think a lot of people try and do is they try and attack the symptom of being low self-esteem, of having whatever this thing is, of having a low self-worth, whatever that worldview is. They're attacking the worldview, whereas at least in the person who has this view, the reason why they have this view is because it's the logical explanation for where they are in life or who they are. So what would I be doing? What's the one thing that I would be doing which would give me the most results that would allow me to overcome whatever I am facing? Well, the answer to this question is I would change the whole way that I am looking at this question. And I would stop looking at low self-esteem or lack of self-worth as the problem, but I would start looking at it as a symptom of a greater problem. Now, what would that be? The symptom of that greater problem would be that you have produced a worldview about yourself where this is the way that you should be. Also, when it comes to low self-esteem and it's low self-worth, as a little caveat that I'm putting in here, is it doesn't have to be in general. There are some people who feel perfectly capable and perfectly empowered to go about what they want to do in their life and in a lot of areas of life. But when it comes to one area, maybe that's to do with starting a business or finances or feeling loved by friends or getting a romantic interest. When it comes to certain areas, that's when they feel like they have an issue. Okay. So we need to stop looking at the lack of self-esteem or the not feeling good enough as the problem. We need to look at where it is coming from. Okay. This is so critical. It's how you stop from getting little to no change or just incremental change to getting a deep transformational change, which can happen overnight. I'm not a snake oil salesman. I'm not going to sell you on something when I don't know who you are. However, from my own clients and from my own experience, and also from the peers that I've watched, there are certain deep-rooted problems that take a long time to get over and take a long time to overcome. But there are also just as many deep-rooted problems which you've had for years, which can just be overcome like that. But it also varies from person to person. So I'm not going to try and sell you on something which I don't have confidence in selling you on. However, when the transformation happened, when I started following this method, and the method is looking for core wounds, looking for the places where this originated from. Now, it's not always going to be cut and dry. It's not always going to be a neat solution. Oh, my mom told me this thing when I was young. She said I wasn't good enough. And then that was the thing. You know, it can be like that, but it can happen through one event, it can happen through a number of events, or it can be the accumulation of experiences through the years that have led to a culmination of concluding the fact that you are not good enough. So I learned this method from one of my big mentors, Kim Barter, alongside all of my other mentors also played their role. But the principle of looking at a lack of self-worth, a lack of self-esteem as just a symptom and not the core root of the problem came from Kim Barter. So I recommend you to go and look him up. So for those of you watching, what does this mean for you? It means that we need to start looking at things surface level. If you just look at the problem being I have low self-esteem as surface level, then all you're going to get is surface level results, which at the start can be useful. But most likely the reason why you clicked on this video and the reason why you're continuing to watch until now is because you've tried those and they haven't quite worked. Or they've worked a bit, but they haven't worked to the extent that you want. So we need to look at things in a deeper, more systemic, more holistic way. And we need to look at that in the way of finding out how you came to this conclusion. Because the baseline status for everyone is just feeling like self-worth or self-esteem isn't even in the picture. If you want to test this, I want you to go back to when you were a child or the earliest you can remember or a baby. Did that person have a lack of self-esteem? No. You could also argue because they have a lack of awareness about who they are, and you'd have some good points there. But it means at some point, this had to have come from somewhere. That's the main point here. At some point, the lack of self-esteem, the lack of self-worth had to come from somewhere. So in other words, what that means, it's a foreign entity. It's something that came from the outside and got implanted inside of us. So what that means is instead of taking I'm not confident or I'm a low self-esteem person as the baseline is actually, well, I didn't have this problem to begin with. So somewhere inside of me, the baseline is not only am I a high self-esteem person, but the question of self-esteem doesn't even arise within me, within my natural, authentic self, which is actually much more powerful than believing you have a lot of confidence or you have a high self-worth. Because if you believe you have a high self-worth, it means there's still a question of self-worth being asked. If there's a question of self-worth being asked, then it might lead to some structural or integrity problems further along the line, because it means that there's still some doubt. Otherwise, there'd be no question, right? There'd be no question for someone else. The same way that I don't question somebody's self-worth, a stranger's self-worth. I just assume, I doesn't even come into my mind. The same way that I'm not looking at them like that, why would I look at myself in that way? So you have to start looking, where did this come from? You need to start asking the certain questions to yourself, the important questions to yourself, which is, well, when did I not have this? Where does this come from? Do I have the same expectation of strangers? Do I have the same expectation of myself as I do to strangers? Do I judge their value? No. Well, why am I judging my own value? And then you have to use this in conjunction with, once you get to what you think is the core seed, what you think is the core root, with my distinctions, or not my distinctions, I got them from Kim Barter, who got them from Gestalt therapy and all these other kind of therapeutic modalities, which is it an introjection? If it is, I have to let it go. Is it a projection? If it is, then I have to re-own it and then I have to see what's still left there. Or is it a split ego state? Is it a part? And I have to work with reintegrating that. I have to work with making myself come together with myself. So depending on what kind of core wound it is, you have to heal it differently. And that's so, so, so important. Because if you heal it in the wrong way, if you try and integrate an introjection, if you try and make introjection like I'm not good enough become a part of who you are, that just creates so much damage in the long term, because it makes it much, much more deeply ingrained and harder to get over. So I have my playlist on those, on how to heal them, in the link below, because that will be so, so important for you to do. But like I said, this is just like a quick video. This is just like a hack. And it all comes down to the way in which you are looking at something. So we're no longer viewing things in a symptom related way. We are looking at things in a much more systemic, controlled, in a much more systemic and deep rooted way. I'm no longer looking at self-esteem as the problem in and of itself. I'm looking at it as a clue to lead me to the deeper problem. Like I said, I have my one-on-one link below, guys. If that sounds like it's interesting to you, I don't do any hard sales or any hard selling on that link, just a chat between who you are, what your goals are, what your problems are, and if I can help you. But I'll give you a bonus, seeing as you stuck around for this long, which is the overall attitude, which is most important for you to go about this kind of work, which is the attitude of aggressive, compassionate patience. Okay. So you're aggressive, you look at these signs for what they are, and you really want to overcome them. You really want to get into the weeds and do really good energetic work, but you're compassionate to yourself always. And then you're very patient with yourself, because you can't control when this thing gets healed. Like I said, it can happen overnight or it can happen over many nights, right? We can't know. So we don't want to be too laissez-faire, as you would say, when too relaxed and not really, hold ourselves accountable. We want to have a little bit of that discipline, but we don't want to have so much discipline that we're trying to control variables that we cannot. Enjoy, guys.